Fixed income at its heart is referring more to things like a bond, or a loan, which have fixed payments maybe through the life of that instrument. When we have big events in the market, with a set piece event like a central bank decision or an election, it's busy and it's vibrant and it's very energized.
Last time on This is Deutsche Bank, we looked at how companies and governments raise money in the capital markets. But that raises another question. What happens next? Once a bond has been issued, investors start buying and selling it. Companies that have expanded across borders need to manage the risks that come from operating across different countries and currencies. On top of all that, financial markets are constantly reacting to news, economic data, and events happening around the world. That's where fixed income and currencies comes in. Welcome to another episode in our Investment Banking 101 series. In our last episode, we explored capital markets and how companies raise money. Today, we're taking a closer look at fixed income and currencies, often referred to as FIC, and the people who help these markets function every day. We'll explore more about how bond trading works, why currencies matter, what happens on a trading floor, and the skills needed to build a career in this area of investment banking. I'm Vicky Garrod, your host for today's episode of This is Deutsche Bank, the podcast for news and trends shaping the world of banking and finance. Let's get started. Here with me is Scott Cameron. Scott, welcome to the podcast. If you could just start by taking maybe 30 seconds to just explain what your role is and what you actually do.
Yeah, certainly. Vicky, thanks for having me on the podcast. So my name is Scott Cameron. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Fixed Income and Currencies. I'm here at Deutsche Bank. I've been fortunate to be at the bank for the best part of 20 years. And I run a fantastic team here in the COO space globally. So what does the COO do? What does the team do? High level, we are business enablement. We help the business deliver what it needs to on a day-to-day basis and strategically. And I'll miss a few things out because there's tons of things going on. But high level, what we do is in sort of 4 or 5 buckets. So strategic execution. So when the bank sets out its plans, in this case, we've set out a plan that reaches into 2028. When we look at what that means for fixed income and currencies, we develop plans around that. And the COO community is heavily involved in that piece of work. We then convert that into operational delivery and tracking. The second thing is what we do on a day-to-day basis, and you can call that the business management aspect of the business, running the machine, making sure we do it safely, and we deliver for our clients and the desks that are doing that day-to-day. So there's lots of things that go into that. It could be cost management, workforce planning, delivering a new product, delivering a new business, looking after the operational risks that go with that business. All these things go into the day-to-day management of that business. The team work very, very closely on a front-to-back basis with our partners in the second and the third line, absolutely critical to what we do. The third aspect of what we do is around, I would say, risk and control. So we have teams, and frankly, the key thing for me is that the risk culture in fixed income is a key ingredient to our success. And we talk about that again, I think at a bank level, it's absolutely critical to what we do. But we have teams dedicated to risk and control in the COO community, and they do a fantastic job of that. So what are they doing day to day? They're looking at the control set. They're assessing the controls against policies, regulations, and compliance. They're designing those controls. They're then putting those controls in place, and they're running them. Okay, so key to what we do in the bank and within fixed income in particular. Another bucket of what we do is around change and transformation. So we talk about key deliverables in the bank. We have a number of those within the FIC space. And really for us, that's a large landscape of things. But again, like to pick out a few bits and bobs that we get on there, modernizing our tech stack. So we are re-engineering, trying to make it simpler, less complex. We have a large regulatory book of work that we're trying to deliver, make sure the bank is, again, regulatory compliant and safe. We may be delivering, again, new products. We're entering new markets, new businesses, et cetera. So we run that through the change and transformation teams. And then the wrapper to all of that really is the strategic coordination around all of the bank. And so in a nutshell, that's what the COO community gets up to.
That's a busy role. You're based on the trading floor, which many traders would argue is the epicenter of any bank. Is it really as loud as it looks on screen?
As loud as it looks on screen. I don't watch a lot of this on TV or in the movies. It can be. It really can be. But the reality is that the market has changed and changed a lot, in my duration in the market and at the bank. And the big driver of that change has been the electronification of the market. So early on, the equity markets and the foreign exchange markets were the most electronified markets in the world. And as we've progressed, particularly post-COVID and things like that, it's become more and more digitalized in the market. And that's changed the trading floor. Now, the dealing floors fundamentally remain the same. We are managing risks, we're connecting with clients, et cetera, et cetera. But when you come onto a dealing floor today, you'll see a lot more screens, a lot more computers and hardware, et cetera, on the floor. And it's quieter. So you have this sort of inverse relationship between volume, which has exploded over the last decade, certainly in terms of trade volumes and so forth and activity in the market. But the noise level on the floor has probably gone down, okay, because we do a lot less voice trading and a lot more electronic trading.
Yes.
Now, that said, when we have big events in the market with a set piece event like a central bank decision or an election, it's busy and it's vibrant and it's very energized. And then obviously you get events that happen on the cuff through the geopolitical scene that we have in front of us today. So fantastic environment to be involved in. I think probably talk a little bit more about, who's on the trading floor a little bit later on.
Yeah, and actually on that, let's start with the building blocks. What is fixed income? What's it used for? And how does it differ from capital markets, which is what we discussed in our last episode?
Right. Okay. Fixed income at its heart is referring more to things like a bond, or a loan, which have fixed payments maybe through the life of that instrument. So in the case of a bond, and bonds aren't all the same, but some bonds and a lot of bonds pay a coupon through the life of the instrument. And then hopefully at the end of that maturity of that instrument, you get your principal back as well. Okay. So that's the sort of thing that it's referring to when we think about fixed income. Fixed income for us encompasses a huge range of instruments and products globally. And it runs from the tradable securities, the cash instruments that we're discussing now, into the derivative element of the book and all the rest of it. So at the end of the day, when you think about what fixed income is doing, there are borrowers and there are investors. And you would have spoken, I'm sure, about the capital markets business, which we work very, very closely with. That's more of a primary market. So if a government or a corporation is looking to raise money, they might do it through an issuance, through debt, through bonds. It might be sort of bank lending through a loan. And we're involved in that as well with the IBCM team, particularly on the DCM side of the business, but lots of other aspects in our financing business as well. And then where fixed income really comes in as a business is in more than the secondary market. So we're making sure that once those instruments are in the market, we provide the liquidity, the funding, the market access, across the spectrum of investors and borrowers across the world. So that's where we fit into that, spectrum, primary and secondary.
So FIC is a particularly important business for Deutsche Bank, isn't it? And for other banks in Europe, in fact. Why is that?
It absolutely is. And maybe I would say that given the position we're in, but Ram and the team have built and created a fantastic business here for Deutsche Bank, servicing clients globally. And really, again, we sit at the heart of the economy, particularly in Europe. And Europe is 450 million people plus in the European Union. There's a lot of activity that's going on with either governments, corporations, institutional clients. And for us, sitting there in the middle of that, we provide the liquidity, the funding, the market access, into these customers and clients. Now, Europe has a lot of trade corridors, either into Asia Pacific, into the Americas, and we facilitate a lot of that with our partners in corporate bank or other parts of the bank. But it goes the other way as well, right? So we're facilitating market access for American clients or Asia Pacific clients or emerging market clients into Europe. And that could be across any set of instruments. And we have a fantastically diversified and balanced business in FIC, whether it be by client, by product, or by region. And that gives us a fantastic foothold. Now, we talk a lot about the house bank and the importance of that. And that really is, we're anchored in Europe as a business in FIC as well as anything else. And we are, the number one player in fixed income in Europe and one of the top players globally when it comes to fixed income as a business.
Very relevant discussion then we're having. That's good. I just want to focus on the trading part of our business and talk more about the two areas that sit under that, rates and credit. So let's start with rates. What falls under that bucket and why is it interesting for investors?
So rates critical part of our business, really, really interesting part of our business here at the bank. And it has a lot of different things in that business, and we won't go into all of those. It would be another episode.
Yeah.
But effectively what the rates business is, it's products linked to interest rates. Okay. And interest rates are a huge driver of activity generally in the fixed income and currencies space, and just more broadly across markets. So the rates business is facilitating borrowers and investors to access risk in terms of interest rate risk and managing that risk. Okay, so they sit at the heart of that. So again, if a bond is issued, it has an interest rate attached to it. And as the market develops, and we can talk a little bit more about that in a minute, the value of that will change. Okay, so I spoke earlier around the central bank decisions and all the rest of it. At the moment, there's a huge amount of focus in the market around inflation. I'm sure everyone's thinking about what that means. And there are divergent thoughts as to what inflation means for interest rates looking forward. And obviously I'm talking more about probably G10 rates at the moment. So the rates business is connecting with clients, helping them manage those risks, and helping investors access, risk transfers if they're interested in that type of product. So that's really what the rates business does.
Good stuff. And moving on to the other bucket, credit. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
So credit is a huge part of the financial industry and what we do here at the bank. So credit is, in many respects, the lifeblood of the economy. We hear about credit and what it means in terms of investing. So credit really, for us, there's lots of different aspects to credit and how we actually look at that and manage that set of businesses and risks across the bank. But credit really is around lending risk, okay, at the end of the day. And for us in the trading businesses, we sit in the middle of that, borrowers, again, and investors. And you think about the instruments within the credit space, there are, again, a lot of different instruments. But if you think about a corporate bond or a CDS, a credit default swap, investors are looking to access yield at the end of the day. And what they're assessing really when they're looking to that is the repayment risk around that debt. Can the issuer repay that debt? And they're looking at that on an absolute basis and a relative value basis and all sorts of other ways of looking at it. So really credit is the lifeblood of the economy. It allows a government or a corporation to, in the case of a government, they may raise debt and credit and then go and build a hospital, a school. There may be some project finance involved. And same thing for corporations. Maybe they need to raise debt and go out and buy another company or working capital, whatever that is, right? Yeah. And so the investors on the other side of that are looking at yield. And when they look at the credit market, they're assessing the ability of that borrower to repay that debt. And then they're looking also at the yield differentials. And so they might look at a government bond versus an investment grade bond or a high yield bond in the credit space. And depending on their risk appetite and how they feel about that, they'll make an investment decision across that spectrum.
So moving on to the second part of your world, which is currencies. What does a currency trader actually trade, and what kind of clients are they working with?
Right, yeah. So currencies, the foreign exchange business here at the bank is a foundational business for us. Fantastic business. Euromoney, we're the number one FX house on the street. What does a foreign exchange business do, and how does it look day to day? So the trading and sales other parts of that complex, they trade currency pairs. Okay, so there are hundreds of currency pairs. But it might be euro dollar, where we're particularly strong, being a European bank. It could be what we call cable, which is sterling and US dollars. It could be any combination of currency pairs, okay, in both the G10 space, so the developed market space, and the emerging market space. We cover all of that. They also look at all of the different product sets. And again, there are a lot of different things going into this. But FX Spot is a core component of what we do as a product. We help clients across the spectrum that need to fix, have more certainty around what their foreign exchange exposures look like out further. So we might help them with an FX forward or an FX swap, or we use a derivative or an option to help them, manage their risk or access risk in terms of sort of foreign exchange. So fundamentally, we're managing currency pairs across the globe, and that is a 24/5 endeavor. So we're always at it.
Non-stop.
Yeah.
And when a client comes to Deutsche Bank with a currency challenge, how often is the solution bigger than just a markets trade? And what other parts of the bank might get involved in that?
Yeah, it's a great question and really goes to the heart of what we do here in the bank, the house bank, anchoring around that, and also the collaboration point. So this is really critical to what we do, not just in FIC, but across the whole institution. So it is bigger, and not always, but we hope it always is. So as an example, and you've just had the conversation around the IBCM business, if a client is involved in mergers and acquisitions, they're buying something, it could be cross-border, there might be a deal contingent trade off the back of that, etc. We would then hope that the foreign exchange component of that structure is also done with Deutsche Bank. We capture that and we help the client through the value chain of that transaction.
Yeah.
But one example, and there's lots of examples of that. The great thing about foreign exchange, from my perspective, is that there's a little bit of FX being done largely everywhere in the bank because the bank is so global with its clients.
Yeah.
And so an MNC in the corporate bank will have, treasury departments in lots of different places across the world. And we work very closely with the corporate bank to help, those corporations manage their foreign exchange risks on a cross-border basis, as an example. So, yeah, foreign exchange is definitely a bigger piece of the wider puzzle and really brings together the house bank, ethos here at the bank.
Let's head back to the trading floor. When a major event happens, be it an election result, a central bank announcement, or a geopolitical event, even a social media post these days can trigger an immense reaction. What's happening on the trading floor in those first few exciting minutes?
Yeah, look, there's a lot of energy on the floor, when these things break. And as I said earlier, there are what I would call set piece events. It might be that central bank or an election, et cetera, that when we prepare very, very carefully for those.
Yeah.
So with our partners across the second line as well, and the risk functions and operations, because often volumes will spike. So we're very methodical around making sure that we can capture, all of that and help our clients through that event. But yeah, through these events, the floor can get really energized. I referred earlier to the volumes. The volume will often spike in those events.
Yeah.
So operationally, very close to that. But if you think about the people that we have on a trading floor, it is traders, but they're just one aspect of it. And they'll be making prices, they'll be booking trades, and obviously managing risk. You then have our coverage teams, absolutely critical to what's going on. They're engaging the client, they're making sure the client is informed and has solutions. And we have our structuring team that work very, very closely with both trading and the coverage team. And structuring is a fantastic part of our business here at the bank, best in the world, I would say, for that team, along with everyone else. And they really provide tailored solutions, ideation for our clients around the more bespoke elements of their risks and opportunities.
Yeah.
We work very, very closely with research. However, research at arm's length aren't necessarily on the trading floor. They sit in different parts, given the nature of research. Yeah. But again, we refer to this as the business complex across trading, coverage, structuring, and research. And then obviously my team, the COO team, are on the floor as well. The other aspect that's really changed over the years is the second line and third line teams that are on the floor. So really critical to us through an event that we have, the risk teams, the operations teams, the finance teams, legal on the floor, compliance and AFC, they're all on the floor. And that's it's a team collaboration around these events, making sure that we're joined up and we provide, the outcome for our clients in the bank that is required.
Fantastic. And what kind of skills are important for each of these teams, would you say?
Yeah, another great question. So the lovely thing about fixed income, and again, applies to the bank at large, but with a FIC hat on, is that it really is a team sport. So there's not one thing that defines, a role or a capability within fixed income. So we've spoken about all the different roles we have, high level around trading, client and coverage, structuring, research as a complex, the COO teams, and then the second line teams. So really, and that will change, right? Like AI, we can't go, 3 steps without AI being thrown around. That will change, the skills and capabilities that we're looking for. But ultimately, we are looking for people that are intellectually curious around financial markets generally. We're looking for people that are resilient, okay, because markets don't always perform the way that you think they're going to perform. We're looking for people that have really good skills around communication.
Yeah.
Okay, so a big part of what we do is technology-based, but ultimately what drives our business and the key to success in our business is the human element. Okay, and connecting with our clients, connecting with our partners internally and collaborating.
Yeah.
So really that skill set is critical. And I think going forward, with AI and other technology coming in will remain really, really important.
Yeah. And if someone is interested in understanding trading but doesn't yet have enough knowledge of it, what would you suggest that they start doing today to really get up to speed?
Yeah, another good question. So I don't think it's just trading, Vicky. I think that, generally financial markets, as I said, there's lots and lots of different roles, not just within FIC, but financial markets generally. So what I would say to that, look, we get a lot of students through and coming in and seeing us and asking these types of questions. We're heavily invested in our grads and interns, within fixed income, a key part of what we do in this business. But what I would say to that is that if people are interested in FIC or just markets generally, maybe pick something, one or two things that you can focus on and learn a little bit more around. And it might be through podcasts. There's lots of ways to access information.
Yeah.
But you might pick interest rates and say, look, I'm going to follow what happens when the Bank of England or the Federal Reserve makes a decision around interest rates. And what does that mean? What's the market reaction to that decision? And then follow that through and learn through that. It might be euro dollar. You might see moves in euro dollar and get interested as to what's moving that and then learn from there. So I would recommend that people pick one or two things that they can then go a little deeper on and get a bit more domain expertise around what these things are, and then go from there.
Well, there you go. Great advice. Thank you, Scott. Thank you. And thank you for tuning into This is Deutsche Bank. If you enjoyed this episode, please do subscribe or leave us a comment and let us know what you'd like to cover in any future episodes. We'll be back soon. And in the meantime, take care and bis bald.